Hello and welcome, seekers. And to you who are joining us for the first time at Divine Journeys, this is a podcast that is HIT for the soul. And HIT stands for healing, intuition, intention, and transformation. So today's episode is going to cover the 4 stages of spiritual awakenings. So if you came across this video, or maybe I should say this video found you, it is not by accident. And where I want to start first is an interesting survey that was done. It was conducted actually in 2012, and it was called Anatomy of a Quantum Change. And I first learned about it in Wayne Dyer's movie called The Shift. So Wayne Dyer has passed, but his works, his books, are still so relevant today. And, the thing I thought about with The Shift, this was after actually when I did my personal story through a documentary called Berni's Journey. And with Berni's Journey, the documentary was not supposed to be my story. As a matter of fact, it was the last thought I would have had, because I would have never gone to India in the first place to do this project if I would have known I would be sharing my story so vulnerably. And it was supposed to be about spiritual teachers through India and their personal stories, their journey of how they became these teachers. So in the process of this documentary project in India, and this occurred in 2011, right before the new year of 2012. So interesting that the survey was conducted around the same time. The movie itself was not going well. The project seemed like a failure. When I got to India, everything is kind of falling apart. And if you've been to India, you understand that it is an assault on your senses, because there is just so much happening. There's a lot of people, so you don't have your personal space. And if you're going through any part of India, the population is very dense. So also, because of the number of cars, there's a lot of pollution and poverty. You could have an experience where you're going down the same road, and on one side you've got mansions, and then the other side, then you've got dilapidated buildings. You've got these slums that are directly across the street. I mean, just the absolute opposite of the experience that you're witnessing can all be overwhelming. And so just that in itself. And then because I was investing in this project on my own, I was very concerned about completing this documentary perfectly. Berni's Journey I'm very proud of it. And so I'll include it in the link, and I'll share why it's something that I always refer back to, and especially when it becomes a topic around spiritual awakening. In the movie, before it became my story, there was a moment that I call the cobra moment. It was because that is when I had my meltdown on screen. And it was equivalent to like a Kundalini awakening. I had a lot of energy going up and down my spine because I was in the fear of this cobra, thinking that this cobra was coming after me. It wasn't. It was just the fact that my fear was playing out in the concern that I had that the project was going to fail and I would go home to nothing. I didn't have previous film experience. I was just coming off a 20-year career in the banking industry. So as a banking executive, I thought I was just applying all my skill set and being able to interview. Because of the public relations background that I had, I would interview the true subjects, my intended subjects of the film. So when the cameraman happened to be recording B-roll, because that's what I thought maybe potentially all I was going to bring home, one of the spiritual teachers came to my aid, Jennifer Huff, and she then walks me through, to walk me off the ledge, walks me through this moment where I am just losing it. And she's asking me questions like, what are you afraid of? What is it that about the cobra that you're concerned about? Are you afraid of dying? And my response was that I wasn't afraid of dying. It was that I was afraid that I hadn't fully lived before I died. Have any of you felt that way? That you were so concerned about, have you truly lived before your last day? Some people refer to it as, don't let the song die inside you. When you hear about people at their deathbed, what were their regrets and lessons that they wanted to impart on people? And that is where I think the reason, the purpose for this survey, the anatomy of a quantum change. My cobra moment was a quantum change, that Kundalini awakening, the moment that changed everything in my life. So let's start. What was this survey for? Well, the purpose of this was to really understand what values between men and women might change before a quantum change. So I want to start with what it meant for men. Okay, so for men, the top 5 values before the priorities and the values shifted was that number 1, they wanted wealth accumulation. Right? It was like, I'm going to be a man and I'm going to take care of my family. And what is in my bank account is my worth. So that seems pretty common. I mean, I get that, right? We want to be able to have especially with men, they want to have the fancy cars. They want to have the big houses. They want to provide. So the second value before a quantum change was personal, or the adventure, the need for adventure, the need to conquer the world, so that their presence, as far as being admired by their peers, that was a major value. Number 3 was achievement. So, it's the idea of who you are is what you do. So the fancy title, or that the CEOs of the world, I want to climb that ladder, or I want to really take over and be the best at what I do. That was very important for men's egos. Then the 4th thing was about pleasure. Oh, the adventure and the great travel and the women that I can bring into my life, and really, sex. And so there was this need for also this prowess, right, as an important value. And the 5th value was respect, being looked up to. Look at what all I've accomplished. And now I want to be revered and respected for what I've been able to accomplish. Now, what's interesting is that the quantum moment happens, and the shift in values, the number 1 value was the focus on spirituality. I was very surprised about that. So the number 1 value for men after quantum change was the need to explore their spirituality. Number 2, personal peace. I am removing myself from this ego about just me, and I'm starting to be aware that I need happiness in a way that is also giving back. The 3rd value was family. Yes, initially it was the wealth accumulation and being able to achieve in order to take care of family. But it wasn't about being in the office, or it wasn't about making sure that there was enough money in the bank, as much as what is the value of the time I spend with my wife and my children? What is the legacy that I'm wanting to leave for my family? 4th was, what's my purpose? So if I am going to be this person who is providing for my family in a different way, am I happy? Am I fulfilled in what I'm doing, in my vocation? So my purpose is really important. Now, number 5 for men is honesty. And not about like, okay, I'm telling a white lie kind of honesty. And, I want to tell you, I'm going to tell the truth now. It was more about the emotions and feelings. Am I being honest about expressing how I feel and being more transparent? So, what I found interesting about that too is that the way that things had turned, that ego can be driven so much that we really want to separate our home life with our professional life. And for men, it was really wanting to blend the two, right? So now for women, this is fascinating. So for women, the values before the quantum change, number 1 was family. I have to serve others. I have to be available to everyone else. So how many of you have ever related to being a mom and you're exhausted because you give, and if you're working in the office or you have your own business, it's also family. It's like running the kids to school or their dental appointments, their sports. Women naturally have this nurturing nature to take care of everyone. Now, value number 2 before the quantum change was independence. So, okay, well, I want to be able to take care of myself. So, but in a way that it's like, I don't want to rely on anyone else. So I will take care of everybody else, but no one needs to take care of me. Okay. Now, number 3, career was important. I know it was for me. It was all about, like, again, a little bit of that independence of like, I am never going to rely on anyone else. It is going to be up to me to take care of myself. And also it was important to have a career because that's what I thought, again, a little similar to about with men, about who you are. Our identities are wrapped up in our professions. Number 4 was about fitting in. Right? It kind of goes back to the hunters and gatherers, in the caveman times where the men would go out and hunt, and then it was the women who would come home or stay home and gather. It was all about making the home comfortable and taking care of the babies. And so this necessary element of like, we're doing this all together as a community, very community driven. So fitting in was important. And number 5, attractiveness. Of course, and who can relate to that? I mean, do you know how many times I wonder about like, if I could just get in front of the camera without worrying about, did I do my makeup right? How's my hair look? And also with menopause. Menopause right now for me, wreaking havoc on my hormones and just the feeling that my body's changing and, how I look in clothes or do I feel bloated? And so the attractiveness, it's very important for women before this quantum change. How do I look? Because how I look has a direct reflection about how I feel. Now, after the quantum change, the values shifted for women. Number 1, women wanted to be more attentive to personal growth. It wasn't about like, how are my kids doing? I've been there. Oh, it's like the saying of like, moms are only as happy as their saddest child, right? So after the quantum shift, it starts to become this focus on ourselves, not in a selfish way and not in a self-centered way, but hey, if I'm really going to be good for everyone else, I need to put the oxygen mask on myself first. So this need for personal development, and one of the reasons why this video may have found you. Number 2, self-worth. I think innately for women, our self-worth is part of that whole like fitting in, that I don't want to stand out. I want to fit in. I want to look like everybody else. And I know I had that feeling because when I came to the United States after evacuating from Saigon days before Saigon fell during the Vietnam War, and there weren't a lot of Vietnamese families that came to the US. My dad was an American GI. My mother was this Vietnamese woman who, when my father left to return home to the US, my mother and I joined him. And when we got there, we were in Nebraska, we were in the Midwest. And I definitely stood out as looking different. And all I wanted to do was just fit in. And then when we moved to Colorado, which I was so happy, we moved to Colorado in 1984, a lot of my girlfriends were blonde. And here I am, like one of maybe two brunettes in our friend group. And all I wanted so badly was just to have blonde hair and blue eyes to fit in. And so there wasn't this appreciation for my unique look at all. And even though people would say, like, well, you really stand out because of that. Well, I didn't want to stand out. So my self-worth was related to, I don't fit in, I don't feel good about myself. But after now with this survey explaining that our self-worth became so important to really discover, the discovery of ourself, who are we really, became important. And really to know that we are good enough was an important value to achieve. Number 3, spirituality. Okay, so spirituality came number 3 on the women's list when it was number 1 on the men's list. This also was fascinating to me because I also believe that women are just by nature of our nurturing, we're already more aware of something greater beyond ourselves, because of how much we pay attention to the needs of others. So I think that's what it comes down to, though. Spirituality is about recognizing who we are and what we're meant to be in the world. And I'll go into that a little bit more as far as the stages of the spiritual awakening. The 4th value is happiness. Seems so easy. Like, are you happy? And how can you answer that question for yourself? Like right now, are you happy? If you're not happy, why? And what is holding you back from that happiness? And is happiness a choice? And that's part of the consciousness that we have through spirituality. I believe that, and I'm going to go into that more. But happiness was so important as a value. And remember, a happy wife, happy life. And your children benefit from it too. So I truly believe that happiness is something that we create. We cannot rely on anyone else to give that to us. So that was number 4 on the list of values, top priorities in this quantum change. Number 5, which, I think I could do a whole episode just on this. I really could do an episode on all those personal values, but number 5 is about forgiveness. Holy cow, we all think about like forgiveness. Well, I may forgive, but I won't forget. Or I'm not going to forgive them. They don't deserve it. I think it's really important that forgiveness was on this list, because what I've also learned is that when we don't forgive someone, the only person that we're really hurting is ourselves. And that is the ultimate betrayal, when we are not honoring ourselves, because the other person who may not even known that they did something, or even if they knowingly did it, we're giving them way too much power, holding over us what we won't forgive, because forgiveness is more for us than for them. The best analogy I've ever heard is actually when I was in India for the Berni's Journey film project, that being angry with someone is like putting yourself in the same jail cell and wanting them to rot, but we're in the jail cell with them. And all along, we held the key, but we held onto the key inside the jail cell, wanting to watch this person rot when we were rotting with them. Another analogy is drinking the poison that you want your enemy to die from. But the thing is, you're the only one drinking it because your enemy is doing their own thing. So forgiveness, I think, is a practice that is so, it is a part of that ascension. Our soul ascension, our spiritual awakening is very instrumental in understanding that that is such an important value for our personal growth, our personal happiness. So I guess you could see like some of these values are all interrelated to some degree, and why it's important to understand, well, where am I in my spiritual awakening? Knowing that there are values related to spirituality, but that both men and women felt that when something happened in their lives, and I call it the seven dreadful D's, the death, divorce, and death and divorce can be from, experiencing a death of a loved one, but also the death of a career, or you could even look at it as a divorce from a job or a career. So death, divorce, disease, debt, dependency, and codependency. So addictions and those who enable addictions. Disaster. So the disastrous tornadoes or hurricanes or anything that is out of our control. Acts of God that can be very devastating and traumatic. And then disorders or even just dysfunctions. I'll consider disorders and dysfunctions together because I look at those as things like the big toxic things around surrounding us, whether it's a toxic work environment, toxic people, like a narcissist, the emotional abuse or psychological and physical abuse that we experience, whether we were younger or with our partners, or in my case, I've had all three with the growing up with parents, and then also with a boss. So all of us have some degree these traumas that we all experience as part of the 7Ds. Those are all things that are what my friend Christy Bells has told me, which I love. It's like the cosmic 2x4 that hits us. And yes, we will definitely be knocked out, just brought to our knees. But the beauty in that is the way that we're able to rise up and be aware of what this means for us and our personal growth, our soul expansion, is for this spiritual awakening to occur so that we can be the best, truest versions of ourselves. If you're enjoying today's episode, be sure to click the like button and subscribe to the podcast to get notified when part 2 of this episode is released. And be sure to join the Divine Journeys community Facebook group to connect with like-minded seekers. Namaste, my friends.